The clatter of plates, the chatter of diners. It was just another night at Mason's Grill, a small-town restaurant where Emma wiped tables with tired hands and quiet dreams. Every shift was a test of patience, not just from rude customers, but from the sharp-tongued owner, Victor Mason. He was ruthless, the kind of man who measured worth in money and mocked anyone who had none. But Emma kept her head down. She had plans, though no one saw them. Least of all Victor. One night, after she spilled a drink on a customer, he made sure everyone heard his laughter. The humiliation burned deep, but she smiled through it. In that moment, she made a silent promise one day she wouldn't serve him. She'd surpass him. And he would remember her name. Emma's nights grew longer. Between double shifts, she studied online. Business, accounting, management, subjects Victor once claimed she'd never understand. Each late night became a silent rebellion. Her friends drifted away, calling her foolish for dreaming. But in the stillness, she discovered something greater than money or approval. She found purpose, and with every lesson learned, the memory of Victor's laughter became less of a wound and more of a spark. Months rolled into years. Emma's world was still small. The restaurant, her books, and her dream. But something inside her had grown vast. She started saving every tip, every spare coin, until her worn notebook turned into a business plan. She studied investors, learned about startups, and began sketching an idea for a cafe. One built on kindness, not cruelty. Victor remained the same, loud, proud, and cruelly amused whenever she dared to speak. But Emma no longer reacted. She'd learned the art of silence. And in that silence, she was building her revenge. One page, one night, one heartbeat at a time. One evening, Victor caught her reading between orders. He snatched her notebook, flipping through the pages filled with her ideas and numbers. His laughter echoed through the restaurant. Cruel, cutting, public. He called her a dreamer with a mop. The staff laughed with him, afraid not to. Emma didn't cry this time. She just looked him in the eye and said softly, "You'll regret that someday." The words silenced the room. Victor scoffed, tossed the notebook on the floor, and walked away. But deep inside, he felt something new. Fear. That night, Emma quit. No shouting, no tears. Just a folded apron left on the counter, and a final look around the place where she had once been small. She walked out into the cold, her heart racing not with fear, but freedom. The next chapter would be hers. She didn't know how or when, but she would return stronger. Not to serve, but to conquer. Somewhere behind her, Victor laughed again, certain he'd seen the last of her. He didn't know that the woman walking away into the night was the one who'd one day own his downfall. 2 years later, the woman who once served tables now sat at a worn desk in a co-working space, her fingers dancing over a keyboard instead of balancing trays. Emma had learned to turn failure into fuel. She'd opened her first cafe, Haven Brew, with borrowed money, second-hand furniture, and a heart full of grit. Every inch of it carried her story: warm lights, fair pay, respect. Her customers came not just for coffee, but for the way it made them feel. And slowly, quietly, her name began to spread. Her first weeks were chaos. Orders mixed up, machines broke down, and her staff, kind but inexperienced, nearly gave up. But Emma refused to crumble. She worked beside them, cleaned floors, comforted tears, and reminded them what they were building. Not just a cafe, but a sanctuary. Slowly, they began to believe in her the way she had learned to believe in herself. As months passed, Haven Brew became more than a cafe. It became a community. Students studied there, strangers met, and locals returned daily for her warmth as much as her coffee. She hired those others ignored: single parents, ex-convicts, dropouts, people who only needed one chance the same way she once did. And each of them carried her quiet promise no one here would ever be made to feel small. But success didn't come without enemies. One afternoon, she received a letter. Mason's Grill was struggling, and Victor Mason was seeking investors. Emma stared at the name like it was a ghost from another life. The irony almost made her laugh. Years ago, he'd told her she'd never be more than a waitress. Now, she was being invited to save him. She closed the letter, leaned back, and whispered to herself, "Not yet. Let him sweat." That night, she stood outside her cafe after closing, watching the streetlights flicker over quiet roads. The same town that once ignored her now whispered her name. For the first time, she didn't dream of escaping. She dreamed of expanding. A second cafe, then a third. But deep down, she knew there was unfinished business. The world was small, and Victor Mason's downfall was no longer a wish. It was destiny waiting for her signal. The years had turned Emma's wounds into wisdom, her silence into strength. News of Mason's Grill closing reached her like an echo from a past life, one she'd already outgrown. Victor Mason, the man who had once ruled her with humiliation, was drowning in his own arrogance. His restaurant stood empty, debts mounting, reputation fading. Emma didn't smile when she heard. She simply whispered to herself, "It's beginning." Success had made her powerful, but time had made her merciful, though mercy, she knew, must be earned. Across town, Victor sat in his office surrounded by unpaid bills, his empire reduced to paper and dust. The sound of a ticking clock filled the room. Steady, cruel, inescapable. Every investor had abandoned him. Pride had once been his armor. Now it was his ruin. He ran a trembling hand through graying hair, the same hand that once pointed in laughter. There was no one left to blame, no one left to call, until his secretary mentioned Haven Brew Holdings, a young business group rumored to invest in failing restaurants. For the first time in years, hope flickered, unaware that it was walking him straight into the arms of his past. The meeting was arranged quickly, Victor desperate, the investor anonymous. When he walked into the sleek downtown boardroom, he didn't recognize her at first. The young waitress from his kitchen was gone. In her place sat a woman who carried silence like power and calm like thunder waiting to strike. Emma rose, greeted him politely, and gestured to the chair across from her. The moment their eyes met, his confidence shattered. He tried to speak, but the words stuck. She didn't need to say a thing. Her presence was the reminder of every cruelty he'd ever thrown her way. Victor stumbled through excuses. The market, bad timing, unreliable staff. Emma listened, expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned forward and asked quietly, "Do you remember what you told me the night I dropped those plates?" His eyes darted away. "You said some people are meant to serve, not lead." Her voice softened. "You were right about one thing. Some people were meant to serve, but not others." The words landed like truth finally finding its home. Victor bowed his head, unable to face her. When the meeting ended, Emma rose, extending her hand. "Good luck, Mr. Mason," she said, not with malice, but grace. Victor hesitated before shaking it, his fingers trembling. As he turned to leave, she felt the weight of the past finally lift. Revenge hadn't healed her. Forgiveness had. Watching him walk away, smaller than she remembered, she realized that victory isn't found in destroying your enemies, but in proving they never had power to begin with. Months passed since Victor's defeat, and Heaven Brew blossomed into a symbol of rebirth. Emma expanded into new cities, each cafe carrying her warmth and her story. She had everything she once dreamed of: wealth, respect, and the quiet satisfaction of victory. Yet as her empire grew, so did the silence around her. Meetings replaced laughter, contracts replaced conversations, and success, though golden, began to feel hollow. In conquering the world that once belittled her, she feared she'd forgotten why she started it all. Her staff adored her. The public praised her. But Emma began noticing what she once despised creeping into her own reflection. Tight deadlines, harsh words, exhaustion in her employees' eyes. She was becoming the very kind of leader she'd vowed never to be. One evening, a young barista spilled a tray of cups, and for a heartbeat, Emma's instinct was anger. But as the shattered porcelain hit the floor, she froze, the memory of her own humiliation flashing back. She knelt, helped clean, and whispered, "Don't worry. We all drop something before we rise." That night, she drove past the empty lot where Mason's Grill once stood. The building was gone, replaced by weeds and silence. She parked and stepped out, standing in the same spot where she'd once mopped floors and swallowed tears. For the first time, she felt no bitterness, only gratitude. Every insult, every cruel laugh had built the steel inside her. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you." Not to forgive him, but to free herself. And in that quiet moment, she realized second chances don't always belong to others. Sometimes they belong to the person you become. The next morning, Emma gathered her core team for a meeting. She announced new policies, profit sharing, flexible hours, wellness support, things she once wished for as a struggling waitress. Her team applauded, but her focus wasn't on their praise. It was on the young woman smiling in the corner, the same barista she'd comforted days ago. In her eyes, Emma saw the same spark she once carried, hope, fragile yet unstoppable. That's when she understood. Legacy isn't about revenge. It's about passing forward what you once needed most. Later that day, Emma sat at her favorite corner table, the same way she had years ago when everything began. The world outside was louder, brighter, faster. But inside, time seemed still. She closed her laptop, letting the hum of conversation surround her. For once, she wasn't thinking about expansion or numbers. She was simply present, a woman who had been broken, rebuilt, and reborn. Her success wasn't measured by what she owned, but by what she refused to become. And in that stillness, she smiled. Not at the memory of her pain, but at the beauty of her second chance. Years had passed since the fall of Mason's Grill. Emma's empire thrived, her name synonymous with resilience. Yet, beneath the glow of success, she carried an ache, a quiet emptiness she couldn't explain. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing charity applications, her assistant placed a file on her desk. The name stopped her breath. Cold Victor Mason Rehabilitation Fund. He had fallen into ruin, living on borrowed hope and fading pride. She stared at the name for a long moment before whispering, "Why now?" Fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with them. She couldn't explain why she went. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe unfinished forgiveness. The shelter was small, quiet, hidden behind the noise of the city. She found him there, thinner, slower, a shadow of the man who once towered over her. Victor was volunteering in the kitchen, serving soup to strangers with hands that trembled from humility, not power. When he looked up and saw her, the ladle slipped from his grasp. There was no arrogance left, only shame. "Emma," he whispered, voice cracking like an old record. Victor tried to speak, stumbling over apologies. He told her everything, how greed blinded him, how failure taught him what success never could. Emma listened in silence, the same silence that had once frightened him. There was no satisfaction in seeing him broken, only a deep ache for what cruelty had cost them both. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly. "I just wanted to thank you for teaching me what kindness looks like." His words disarmed her more than his cruelty ever had. When Emma left the shelter, rain had begun to fall harder. She stood under her umbrella, watching the people hurry by, her heart heavier than she expected. The man who once broke her had been broken far worse by his own choices. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger, only empathy. True strength, she realized, wasn't found in vengeance or victory. It was in the ability to let go, to wish peace, even to those who once caused pain. Later that night, Emma sat by her window, staring out over the city she had built her empire in. For years she believed power would heal the wounds of her past. But it was forgiveness that finally did. Somewhere out there, Victor was rebuilding his life, and that was enough. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes as the sound of rain softened against the glass. The storm had ended, not outside, but inside her. Emma's world had come full circle, but her story was far from over. The lessons carved by hardship had become her compass, guiding her toward something bigger than success. Purpose. She founded the Haven Initiative, a program to fund small dreams like hers. Once was cafes, bakeries, workshops run by those who only needed one chance. Reporters called her the woman who built second chances. But Emma didn't seek fame. She sought healing, not just for herself, but for everyone still waiting to be seen. Every week, she visited new applicants, single mothers, former waiters, veterans, dreamers of every kind. Their eyes reminded her of who she once was: hopeful, afraid, unstoppable. She listened to their stories like sacred music, offering not charity, but belief. The world had taught her that kindness was the most underestimated power of all. Quiet, relentless, and capable of rewriting lives. Her movement grew faster than she expected. News outlets began calling, documentaries requested interviews, and investors wanted in. Yet, fame made her cautious. She remembered Victor's hunger for validation and vowed never to chase it. Instead, she spent her days in quiet mentorship, her nights writing letters of encouragement to those she'd funded. She didn't measure success in profits, but in reopened doors. Every soul she helped became another verse in her redemption. Months later, at a community award ceremony, Emma spotted someone in the crowd she didn't expect. Victor. He looked older, healthier, humbled. Their eyes met across the room. He smiled, small and genuine, and nodded in gratitude. She returned the gesture. No words needed. That single glance carried everything their history once held: pain, forgiveness, and the final surrender of the past. Neither of them owed the other anything now except peace. When the applause faded and the lights dimmed, Emma stepped outside into the night. The air was cool, stars scattered across the sky like the dreams she once thought unreachable. She had fought for her future, faced her past, and built a bridge between both. She wasn't the poor waitress anymore, nor the powerful entrepreneur. She was simply a woman who had turned pain into purpose. And for everyone still waiting for their second chance, she would be the proof that it was never too late to start again. Years later, the world had changed, but Emma's story lived on in the hearts of those she'd helped. Her cafes had become sanctuaries across the country, each one carrying her belief that dignity and kindness could rebuild anyone. She walked through one of her oldest branches, now run by a young woman she'd once mentored. The laughter, the warmth, the smell of roasted coffee, it all felt familiar, like coming home. Life, she realized, had brought her full circle, back to where the dream first began, only this time she was the one being served. She sat by her favorite window, the same corner where she'd once dreamed of freedom, now surrounded by people who'd found theirs because of her. A group of students studied in one corner. An elderly man laughed with his daughter in another. And near the back, a new waitress smiled shyly while taking orders. Emma watched them all, heartful. These walls weren't just brick and wood. They were the echoes of every second chance she had given, each one turning pain into purpose. A journalist approached her one day, asking, "What's your secret to success?" Emma smiled gently and replied, "It's not a secret, it's a story, one that started with failure." She paused, looking out the window, her reflection merging with the city beyond. "Sometimes," she continued, "we're given pain not to break us, but to shape us. And if we're brave enough to keep standing, one day we realize the struggle was never punishment. It was preparation. As the day ended, Emma walked outside and stood beneath the glowing sign of her cafe. The street hummed softly with life. Laughter, footsteps, passing cars. For a moment she closed her eyes and heard the echo of clattering plates, the sound that once broke her spirit. Only now, it made her smile. The same noise that symbolized humiliation had become the soundtrack of everything she had built. She had not destroyed her past, she had rewritten it. Later that night, back home, Emma sat by her window overlooking the city. The world outside was alive with movement, the same world that once turned its back on her. She smiled, knowing she had left something behind. Not an empire of coffee shops, but a legacy of compassion. Somewhere, a struggling dreamer was finding hope again because she once refused to give up. That was her true victory. And as the night deepened, Emma whispered to the stars, "For every person still waiting for their second chance, it's coming. Just keep believing."